Greetings, loyal subjects of the Imperium of Man. I am Librarian Elias of the Adeptus Astartes. I am creating a series of recordings with the intent of educating the general populace of the dangers of the galaxy. All of this information comes from the Lexicanum, provided to me by the Adeptus Mechanicus. I will be reading verbatim from their archives. This recording will cover one of the many allies the Imperium has. Primarch of the 13th Legion, Roboute Guilliman. Roboute Guilliman, also known as the Avenging Sun, is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, an accomplished warlord and diplomat who ruled his empire before rediscovery by the Emperor. Guilliman was unique among his brother Primarchs in that he saw himself not only as a warrior, but also a builder of civilizations. In addition to his leadership of the largest Space Marine Legion during the Great Crusade, Guilliman became renowned for his efforts to preserve the Imperium in the aftermath of the devastating Horus Heresy, becoming Lord Commander of the Imperium. Among his most noteworthy achievements is the authoring of the Codex Astartes and the creation of the modern Imperial military structure. Shortly after the 13th Black Crusade, Roboute Guilliman was restored from his wounds and now once again leads the Imperium as its Lord Commander and Imperial Regent, the living voice of the Emperor. The following is an extract from Ultima Operational Record 1136.27.v. Describes the Ultramarines Primarch thus: he is handsome in a plain way. He is handsome the way a regent on an old coin is handsome, like a good sword is handsome. He is not handsome like a ritual weapon, the way Fulgrim is. He is not angelic, like Sanguinius. There is a dutiful line to his jaw, like his good brother Dorn. They share a nobility. There is great strength of Ferris and the vitality of Mortarion. There is, sometimes, the rogue glint of the Khan in his eyes, or the solemnity of the lion. In the architecture of his nose and brow there is, many claim, an energy and triumph of Horus Lupercal. There is none of the bitterness that shadows Corax, or the persecuted despair that haunts poor Conrad. There is never any of the deliberate mystery that obscures Alfarius or Magnus, and he is more opened than that buried soul of Vulkan. He never displays the pitch of fury found in Angron, nor do his eyes ever ignite with a psychotic gleam of rust. He is a high achiever. He knows this of himself. Sometimes it feels like a fault that he has to excuse his brothers, but then he feels guilty for making excuses. He writes a great deal. He codifies everything. Information is power. Technical theory is victory. He uses a stylus by choice, recording in his own handwriting. He has been writing notes on Tevanti war practices for 17 minutes, but he has still noted and marked 1,500 data bulletins and updates that have tracked across the secondary screens to his left. He sees and reconciles everything. Information is victory. Like the other Primarchs, Roboute Guilliman was one of 20 genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Mankind. Like his brothers, Roboute was taken as an infant by the powers of chaos and removed to a far-flung world in an effort to prevent the coming of the age of the Imperium. The infant Guilliman's capsule fell to Earth on Macragge, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule, they found a child, surrounded by a glowing aura. He was taken back to Condor, one of the two consuls who governed Macragge, who adopted the infant as his son and named him Roboute. Roboute's arrival on Macragge was a pretentious time, and many reported strange sights. Most notably, Condor dreamed of the Emperor and found himself beside Hera's Falls in the valley of Lapanus. Upon awakening, Condor assembled his bodyguard and rode to Hera's Falls, where they found the child. The name Condor gave the child. Roboute means Great One. Guilliman would also be raised by Condor Sensashal, Tarusha Uten, a strong-willed and capable woman. Roboute was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By age 10, he had mastered every subject the wisest men of Macragge could teach him, and his insights into matters of history, philosophy, and science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talents were as a military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Illyrium, a mountainous region in the far north of Macragge, whose wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Roboute fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the wild men, who never again threatened the most civilized parts of Macragge. While the history books state Guilliman militarily subdued the Illyrians, the reality was more complicated. Rather than engage in a protracted mountain guerrilla war, he simply occupied the Illyrians' sacred shrines. This caused the Illyrians to search forth to meet his armies, but rather than crush them then and there, he challenged their chieftain to battle. During the duel, Guilliman only defended himself from his foes' blows, but never launched his own attacks. The chieftain eventually exhausted himself, but rather than slay his enemy, Guilliman instead presented him with the Illyrians' most sacred religious artifact, which centuries before the consuls of Macragge had stolen. Guilliman's act of diplomacy and humanity convinced the Illyrian chieftain to halt his campaign, seeking to become a just lord like Guilliman instead. It was at this moment that Tarusha Uten realized Guilliman had proven himself a true king. On his return to the capital, Roboute found the city in chaos, and his father's co-consul, Galen, had attempted a coup. Galen led a faction of Macragge's nobility who were used to enjoying their wealth and position at the expense of armies of slaves, and resented Connor's legislation favoring the common people, among whom he was immensely popular. Approaching the city, Roboute and his soldiers saw the city in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Galen's men, while the consul house was under siege. Roboute left his men to restore order to the city, while he rushed to the consul house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. He had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Galen's employ, and with his dying breath, told Roboute who was responsible. Roboute swiftly crushed the rebellion and, amid a wave of popular relief, assumed the title of sole consul of Macragge. He set about punishing the treachery and carrying out his father's vision. Galen and his co-conspirators were executed, and their lands and wealth were redistributed to the people. With superhuman energy, Roboute reorganized Macragge's entire social structure, creating a meritocracy where office and honors were given to the hardworking rather than the wealthy and influential. Under his leadership, Macragge prospered as it had never had before. The arrival of the Emperor. While Roboute was prosecuting his war against the Illyrian rebels, the Emperor of Mankind and his armies had reached the neighboring planet of Espinor. It was there that the Emperor heard stories of the extraordinary son of Consul Condor and realized that he had found one of the lost Primarchs. However, due to an unexpected warp storm, the Emperor's ship was thrown off course, and by the time it reached Macragge, Roboute had been ruling for almost 5 years. When the Emperor reached Macragge, he found a world that was self-sufficient, prosperous, with a strong and well-equipped military, and engaging in trade with the nearby systems. Impressed, the Emperor assigned command of the Ultramarine Space Marine Legion to Guildyman, and relocated the Legion's forward base to Macragge. During the Great Crusade, with the exception of the Lunar Wolves, no legion conquered as many worlds, or conquered worlds as fast, or left conquered worlds in a good state during the Great Crusade as the Ultramarines. Whenever Guilliman liberated a world, he would not move on until he had set up a self-sufficient defense system, and left advisors behind to create industry, set up trade routes with the rest of the Imperium, and form a government whose first concern would always be the well-being of the people. At the same time, with the help of his new advisors, Guilliman created a supremely efficient military machine on Macragge and its surrounding worlds that provided the Ultramarines with a steady flow of new recruits. This factor, combined with the minimal casualties suffered thanks to Guilliman's tactical skill, allowed the Ultramarines to become the largest of all the Space Marine legions. When Horus was appointed War Master by the Emperor, the reaction among the other Primarchs were mixed. Some supported the appointment out of affection for Horus, some opposed it, and some were cynically accepting. However, Guilliman, Dorn, and Jagatai Khan supported the appointment, believing in their cool, rational judgment that Horus really was the most worthy of them. For this reason, and because of their military genius, Horus valued Guilliman and Dorn as his closest advisors. Privately, Guilliman held 4 of his brothers in the greatest esteem: Dorn, Sanguinius, Leman Russ, and Ferrus Manus. He referred to them as the Dauntless Few, and pronounced that he could easily win any war outright if he had any one of those 4 and his legion at the Ultramarine side. Conversely, relations between Guilliman and Lorgar became miserable after the Emperor had the Ultramarines destroy Monarchia and be present during the shaming of the word-bearers, while Guilliman carried out these orders to the letter and appeared to be firmly supportive of the Emperor in front of Lorgar. In truth, he was uncomfortable with his actions and upset that the Emperor used his legion as a tool for humiliation that drove a wedge between the Ultramarines and word-bearers. At the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, Guilliman and the Ultramarines were tricked by Horus, who sent them to the Viridian system, while Horus carried out his treasonous plot. When the treachery was revealed, the Ultramarines were poorly placed to react to it. While the Ultramarines mustered their forces at Calth in Ultramar, they were attacked by the Word-Bearers, and the Legion took heavy losses. However, the Word-Bearers had overlooked 2 major points: the unbreakable fighting spirit of the Ultramarines, and the brilliance of Guilliman's command. In an attempt by Lorgar to assassinate Guilliman with a demon who attacked the bridge of his flagship, forcing Guilliman to be sucked into space and fight several word-bearers without a helmet, Guilliman was eventually able to reboard his ship and promised to hunt down and kill Lorgar for the betrayal. At the climax of the battle, Guilliman ripped out one of the 2 hearts of Corferon, the word-bearer's commander at Calth, after he had tried to tempt Guilliman to join the forces of Chaos. Meanwhile, Angron of the World Eaters and Lorgar of the Word-Bearers had launched a Shadow Crusade on the isolated worlds of Ultramar. Their plan was to destroy as much of Ultramar as they could, while the Ultramarines were occupied on Calth. After the victory at Calth, Guilliman, presumably under the guidance of his newly reinstated librarians, traveled to an isolated warp jump point to the outer fringes of Ultramar. There, he encountered Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, who had just recently finished his war in the Cygnus Cluster. The navigators of the Blood Angels had been ordered to find the closest stable warp zone, which many assumed to be Terra. Instead, fate brought them to Ultramar. With the addition of the Blood Angels to his forces, Guilliman pronounced that they could finally begin countering the Shadow Crusade. After Calth, Guilliman pursued Lorgar, who had since been allied with Angron, to the world of Duceria. There, the Ultramarines engaged both World Eaters and Word-Bearers, while Guilliman himself battled Lorgar, finding the once weaker Word-Bearer's Primarch to be surprisingly capable in combat. The situation for Guilliman got worse when Angron arrived, battering Guilliman with a furious assault and eventually defeating the Lord of Macragge. However, as Angron was about to land the final blow, Ultramarines were able to arrive and safely retrieve their Primarch. As a result of being cut off by the ruin storm created by the traitorous Word-Bearers, Guilliman feared the Imperium lost and created a second empire, Imperium Secundus, as a contingency. Many loyalist brothers were brought to Macragge thanks to the activation of the Xenos device known as the Pharaohs. Not wanting to appear vain and power-hungry like his brother Horus, Guilliman refused to declare himself Emperor of Imperium Secundus, instead initially trying to convince Lionel Johnson to take the position, despite being distrustful of the Dark Angel's Primarch's motives. While organizing the creation of Imperium Secundus, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by an Alpha Legion squad disguised as Aeonid Thiel and other Ultramarines. Later, when Conrad Kurz was let loose upon Macragge, Guilliman and the Lion battled the Night Lord's Primarch together, but were led into a trap. Instead of being cornered, Kurz detonated charges and brought the entire structure down upon their heads. Guilliman and the Lion survived thanks to Barbarous Dantiok activating the Pharaohs, which teleported the duo to Sotha. The Lion and Guilliman then made their way back to Macragge, where the Blood Angels had now arrived. Guilliman decided to name the reluctant Sanguinius the Regent of Imperium Secundus. However, Guilliman frequently clashed with his distrustful and taciturn brother Lionel Johnson over policy. Obsessed with hunting for Conrad Kurz and Macragge, the Lion insisted that the Night Haunter was behind rebellious plaguing the world and demanding martial law be instituted. After a bombing hit hidden Astari's convoy on Macragge, the Dark Angels were deployed by the Lion to establish martial law without Guilliman's express permission. Guilliman and the Lion again came to disagreement over the rebellion in the Illyrium region of Macragge, the Dark Angels Primarch wishing to use the weapons of mass destruction to flush them out, as he suspected Kurz was hiding there. Ultimately, the Lion led the attack into Illyrium, and Kurz was captured. At Guilliman's insistence, he was given a public trial. During the trial, Kurz accused the Lion of ordering secret orbital attacks against the rebellion, which enraged the Dark Angel's Primarch and nearly led to him slaying Kurz in the court. Guilliman and Sanguinius dismissed the Lion from Imperium Secundus as a response, but later the Lion reappeared and asked to be Kurz's jailer instead. Following the trial of Kurz, Sanguinius, Lionel Johnson, and Guilliman all agreed to try and breach the Ruin Storm to reach Terra and aid the Emperor, who they now knew still lived. In the Ruin Storm, the Loyalist fleet came across a variety of horrors and a word of an entity spreading destruction known as the Pilgrim. During the voyage through the Ruin Storm, Guilliman's fleet was ambushed by traitor forces at Anuari, where the Avenging Sun survived an assassination attempt by word-bearers armed with Athames, weapons that were said to be able to manipulate the fabric of reality. Believing he could study the weapons for a better understanding of the enemy and potentially using it against them, Guilliman kept the blades in his vault. During the Battle of Piran, Guilliman commanded the Ultramarines personally, as Sanguinius received a vision, and he realized that he needed to go where the struggle had begun. Davin. Reluctantly, Guilliman and the Lion agreed to trust in Sanguinius, but both thought they would simply destroy the world upon arriving. While over at Davin, Sanguinius shocked the Lion by boarding the Invincible Reason and taking the captive Conrad Kurz with him. Sanguinius hoped to use Kurz's prophetic abilities to determine what he was meant to do upon Davin. Sanguinius then commanded a mass landing on the world, and the enraged Lion nearly ordered that Davin be subjected to exterminatus, regardless of Sanguinius' presence on it. Becoming horrified at the thought of killing his brother, the Lion expressed to Guilliman that he believed something was trying to manipulate them to the path of damnation. The Ultramarine Primarch knew what he must do, and crushed his captive Athame blades with his power fist. He declared he would not be tempted the same way Horus had. At Davin, Sanguinius was trapped within a portal and did battle with a demon Madial, while Guilliman and the Lion desperately tried to reach him. The vicious battle erupted both on Davin and above it, in which Guilliman's acting flagship, Samothrace, was destroyed in orbit by the demon ship Veritas Ferrum. During the battle at Davin's temple, Guilliman and the Lion managed to finally fight his brothers, and together they brought down a massive soul grinder. Eventually, Sanguinius was able to escape, and the Space Marine forces evacuated to space. Davin was destroyed by cyclonic torpedoes, and with its anchor gone, the demonic fleet vanished. In the place of where Davin once was, a breach in the ruined storm was visible. The path led to Terra, but upon further study, it became apparent that somehow Horus had foreseen this route, and a larger blockade was erected to block them. Guilliman and the Lion agreed to distract the blockade, while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made directly for Terra, for that was their destiny. After the death of the ruined storm, Guilliman gathered whatever forces he could and make haste for Terra. In his path lay a large defensive chain of hundreds of worlds manned by the Iron Warriors. In a series of bitter engagements, both sides took heavy losses, but the Ultramarines were able to maintain a steady advance. Ultimately, Guilliman was able to set course for Holy Terra, traveling at maximum speed. His legion was only hours away, alongside the other legions. This ultimately decided the Imperium's fate when Horus was forced to gamble by letting the Emperor teleport upon his battle barge. The fight that then took place is known throughout Imperial record. In the aftermath of the Great Betrayal, the Emperor had been incapacitated, and the Space Marines' numbers had been decimated by defections to Chaos and battle losses. The Ultramarines were left as the largest loyal legion, and Guilliman assumed the title of Lord Commander of the Imperium. For years thereafter, Guilliman deployed and led the Ultramarines throughout the galaxy, reclaiming worlds lost to Chaos and preventing the loss of still others to the rebellion or invasion from outside forces. At the same time, Guilliman reorganized the Space Marine legions as chapters and composed the Codex Astartes, the tome that the Ultramarines and many other chapters would follow strictly. Guilliman led the assault against the Alpha Legion on Escrador in the aftermath of the Heresy, and due to the vanity of Alfarius, he utilized a surprise attack at the heart of the traitors and killed Alfarius in a duel. However, he and the Ultramarines were greatly mistaken in the belief that the snake would die without the head, as indeed, the Alpha Legion symbol is a Hydra, the multi-headed serpent. The Ultramarines were soundly pushed back time and again by traitor Marines. Undaunted at the loss of their Primarch, Guilliman eventually pulled his forces back into orbit and bombarded the planet from above. Sometime before the Battle of Thessala, Guilliman tasked the tech priest, Belisarius Cole, with two deeds: the resurrection of Guilliman should he fall, and the creation of the next generation of Space Marines that would soon be known as Primaris Marines. Later, in the Battle of Thessala against the Emperor's children, Guilliman had been grievously wounded, while Alfarius had not greatly embraced the powers of Chaos and was essentially unchanged from his original Primarch form. Fulgrim had been to the Eye of Terror, reaping the terrible powers therein, and had been elevated by Slaanesh to a mighty and fell demon prince, no longer resembling a man, but of his original purity of form corrupted and augmented by the ruinous powers. Fulgrim was now a serpentine creature of immense stature and multi-limbed. Each limb carried a poisoned sword, and in the clash, Fulgrim stabbed Guilliman in the neck. Guilliman was interred in a stasis field by the apothecaries and remains frozen in the instant of death, while Fulgrim escaped to the Eye of Terror. For the next 10,000 years, Guilliman's mortal body remained in stasis on the shrine of Guilliman deep within the Temple of Correction, one of the holiest places in the entire Imperium. Some pilgrims claimed that the Primarch's wounds were slowly recovering, a feat credited to the power of the Emperor. Others deny the phenomenon and point out the sheer impossibility of change within the stasis field. Yet enough believed the stories to come and witness for themselves the miracle of the Primarch. Shortly after Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade and the destruction of Cadia, the tech priest Belisarius Cole and Saint Celestine led a group of Imperial survivors into the Webway with the aid of the new Eldar allies. The group arrived at Macragge, where Cole revealed that he had in fact lived for the last 10,000 years and was ordered by Guilliman himself to complete two tasks in the event of his downfall. One of these was to revive Guilliman, a feat that Cole can now accomplish thanks to Eldar aid. Using a suit of power armor that regenerated the wounds inflicted by Fulgrim, Guilliman was restored just as Black Legion forces invaded Macragge. Reborn, Guilliman swiftly drove off the Chaos Invaders before taking in the truths of the Imperium after his 10,000-year absence. Guilliman displayed several miracles after his rebirth. His mere presence was able to cure any afflicted by a Nurgle-created blindness-inducing illness. However, disgusted by the decay, superstition, and ignorance that surrounds the modern Imperium, Guilliman convened a war council of his Ultramarines as to what to do next. After several days, he declared his intent to travel to Terra and see his father upon the Golden Throne. However, Guilliman's revival had attracted the gaze of the Gods of Chaos and Demon Primarchs, throwing the warp into an uproar. The journey to Terra, known as the Terran Crusade, became an arduous affair that saw his fleet trapped in the Maelstrom after an ambush by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. Inside the Maelstrom, the Imperial expedition was defeated by Kairos Fateweaver and the Red Corsairs, with the Primarch himself trapped in crystal chains made from his own doubts. Held by Kairos inside a Blackstone fortress, the Imperial expedition seemed doomed. However, thanks to the efforts of the Harlequin, Salandri Veilwalker, and Fallen Angel Cypher, Guilliman and the rest of the surviving expedition were freed and escaped towards a webway portal. Guilliman held the portal long enough for his men to escape, defeating the bloodthirster Skarbrand after witnessing the sacrifice of Marshal Malaric. The Imperial expedition eventually arrived through another portal to Luna, but this time were followed by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. On the surface of Luna, Magnus and Guilliman dueled as the battle raged around them. Guilliman was overcome by Magnus' psychic abilities until the arrival of reinforcements from Terra that included the Sisters of Silence. With Magnus' psychic powers weakened, Guilliman was able to impale his demonic brother and force him back into the webway as the gate was sealed. Soon after, Guilliman landed on Terra and gained access to the Emperor's throne room. Inside the Imperial Palace, Guilliman stood before the Golden Throne alongside Captain General Trajan Valoris and the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia in a surreal experience which Guilliman cannot fully remember. The now nearly inhuman Emperor told him that he was the last hope to save mankind and brutally assaulted his mind with dark truths of the galaxy and its history. What exactly transpired is unclear. According to Valoris, Guilliman spoke in silent, psychic conversation with the Emperor for several minutes, while Guilliman remembers falling to the ground in agony. Moreover, only minutes seemed to pass for the two. But when they emerged, it had been over a day. Regardless of the truth, Guilliman emerged with a new determination. He gathered the High Lords of Terra and declared that the Imperium would be reorganized and rearmed under his leadership in order to confront the coming threat of chaos. With that, Guilliman declared himself Lord Commander of the Imperium once more. He later declared himself Imperial Regent, the living hand of the Emperor. One of his first major acts as Lord Commander was to defend Terra itself against the forces of Khorne at the Second Battle of Terra. Guilliman subsequently declared the Indominus Crusade to reclaim the devastated worlds isolated from Terra by the Great Rift. The campaign was waged for the next century as Guilliman acted as Supreme Commander and Chief Administrator of the Imperium. He simultaneously oversaw vast campaigns spearheaded by Belisarius Caul's new Primaris Space Marines and sweeping civic reforms, which culminated in the Codex Imperialis. As the Indominus Crusade wound down, he rushed back to Ultramar to protect his sons from the onslaught of Nurgle. During the Plague Wars, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by Mortarion, Typhus, and Kugath, a great unclean one, on Parmenio. Guilliman was nearly cornered in the trap, but was saved by the efforts of a mysterious young girl that seemed to be a powerful living saint. The Plague Wars came to the dramatic conclusion at Ajax. Guilliman learned of the plot being enacted there by Mortarion and Kugath through interviewing a captured demon host, much to the objection of his Tetrarch Decimus Felix, his Eldar liaison Ilianda Tasse, and the Grey Knights. Despite knowing he was walking into a trap, Guilliman decided to nonetheless confront Mortarion on Ajax. On the Blighted World, the two came to blows, and Guilliman was able to hold his own for a time, but was eventually defeated by the Demon Primarch's warp-enhanced might and resilience. With Guilliman disabled, Mortarion administered the deadly phage known as the God Blight, which was capable of even killing a Primarch. Guilliman remained defiant as he succumbed to the disease, refusing Mortarion's goading to give in to Nurgle in order to have the pain end. Seemingly dead for a time, as his spirit hung in the balance, Guilliman experienced a surreal vision of his reunion with the Emperor upon his return. The vision makes it clear that not even Guilliman truly knows what transpired in the throne room that day, save that the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia. In reality, the Emperor's psychic might flowed through Guilliman, and the Primarch was able to spring back to life, causing a shocked Mortarion to flee before the power of his father. Channeling the Emperor directly, Guilliman raised his father's sword and unleashed a psychic attack that cut into the garden of Nurgle itself. The mighty blow was enough to damage a portion of the garden and wound Nurgle personally. With that, the Primarch fell into unconsciousness. Guilliman reawoke back in orbit over Ajax, having been evacuated from Ajax by Kulkan's custodians. He met with militant apostolic Matthew in order to thank him in his part for the victory on Ajax, and the priest informed the Primarch that the Emperor was preparing to return. Matthew died shortly after, and Guilliman would declare him a saint in the aftermath of his heroism on Ajax, now questioning his father atheism and preparing to move his attention to the Pariah Nexus. Guilliman began to probe Beresalia's call for means to bring the Emperor back. After Ajax, he also expressed his intent to leave the Imperium Sanctus and journey into Imperium Nihilus. Like the other Primarchs, Guilliman wields a series of Wargear unique to himself. It is known that at the height of his power during the Horus Heresy, Guilliman was armed with a Hand of Dominion, a mighty power gauntlet that with Guilliman's strength could fell a Titan. The Gladius Incandor, a blade of exceptional craftsmanship and a symbol of his legend, as well as an arbitrator, a customized combi bolter. For protection, Guilliman wore a suit of power armor known as the Armor of Reason. Upon his resurrection at the end of the 41st millennium, Guilliman continued to use the Hand of Dominion, but took up the Emperor's sword as his primary weapon. In addition, he now wears the Armor of Fate, the very device that allowed him to heal from the injuries sustained by Fulgrim 10,000 years earlier. This concludes the information regarding Guilliman. More in-depth information regarding him will be recorded at a later date. This is Librarian Elias, signing